Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So there's some interesting information that I have for the show today. I was hoping that there would be some sort of, I don't know, news, a decision of some sort out of Ferguson so that, you don't have to wait till Monday to hear my reaction to what happens out there. But apparently Darren Wilson, that's the police officer that shot Michael Brown and killed Michael Brown, apparently, regardless of the outcome from the grand jury, whether the grand jury indicts or does not, Darren Wilson is in talks with his police department about possibly resigning. So there's a bunch of news online about that. Just do a Google search for Darren Wilson, and I'm sure by the time you listen to this later in the day, there might be more news, but there's a story from CNN. I'll just throw that in the show notes. It says Ferguson officer Darren Wilson in talks to resign, and it's from about 5 hours ago, so it's from this morning. But there was the speech by El Presidente last night where, according to the Republicans, the world's going to end. There's amnesty for 11 million undocumented immigrants, and society as we know it is going to collapse. Well, that's not anywhere near what President Obama said during his speech last night. I did not read the entire speech. I glanced over and skimmed the entirety of the speech. And there's an article from Reuters that, they go through and they give some of the highlights and lowlights and some of the Republican response. So let me read that article from Reuters. President Barack Obama imposed the most sweeping immigration reform in a generation on Thursday, easing the threat of deportation for some 4.7 million undocumented immigrants and setting up a clash with Republicans who vow to fight his move. So, right off the bat, he's only easing the threat of deportation for 4.7 million out of the nearly 11 million undocumented immigrants. So, again, not blanket amnesty, as the Republicans claim. And he's also not giving citizenship to these 4.7 million people. He's just saying, we're not going to send you back if you XYZ. So, let's continue with the article. In a White House speech, Obama rejected Republican arguments that his decision to bypass Congress and take executive action was tantamount to amnesty for illegal immigrants. It was a bigger use of executive action in a year in which they have become a signature way of working around congressional gridlock. Obama said, quote, amnesty is the immigration system we have today. Millions of people who live here without paying their taxes or playing by the rules. Republicans, however, pounced quickly, charging that Obama had overstepped his constitutional powers a year after declaring he did not have the authority to act on his own. But it seems that Republicans have short-term memories, as do Democrats, really. Like, pretty much everybody that is involved in party politics has a short-term memory. Because it was 30-ish years ago, maybe, 86, when Ronald Reagan had some sort of immigration reform thing that he did without congressional authorization, and that, too, was being called amnesty. So let's continue here with the article from Reuters. In a video released before Obama's televised speech, House of Representatives Speaker John Boehner said, the president has said before that he's not king and he's not an emperor, but he sure is acting like one. The article continues. It says, with 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, Obama's plan would let nearly 4.4 million who are parents of U.S. citizens or parents of legal permanent residents remain in the country temporarily without the threat of deportation. Those undocumented residents could apply legally for jobs and, quote, join American society, although I would argue that they already have joined American society because they are living here, they are shopping here, they are probably working, although not, quote unquote, legally working, which means that they're not paying taxes. Hooray for them. I wish more people would become undocumented. I would love to wind up being undocumented. Not because I think that people that don't have documents get, special rights, but that really is, in some ways, the essence of freedom. Not having documents that allow you to be tracked and traced and extorted. And that's really what I want. I want real freedom. I don't want some agency saying that I owe them money because I did work for someone that was not them. They do this weird thing of, well, we provide you a service. Which service? Because I don't really remember ever asking you to provide me a service. Well, we provide services. Without us, you'd be speaking German and you wouldn't have roads. Right. We wouldn't have roads. We'd have effing flying cars right now. That's what I really want. I want flying cars. And we can't have flying cars with coercive governments. So let me continue with the article. Here it says, those undocumented residents could apply legally for jobs and join American society, but not vote or qualify for insurance under the president's health care law. The measure would apply to those who have been in the U.S. for at least 5 years. So, again, doesn't apply to everybody, only applies to those who have been here for at least 5 years. And as I understand what's written here in the Reuters article, plus what I read from the president's speech, it would only apply to those people who have been here 5 years and are the parents of a legal citizen or a legal resident. The article here continues, there's about another 270,000 people who would be eligible for relief under the expansion of a 2012 move by Obama to stop deporting people brought illegally to the U.S. as children by their parents. So basically it would prevent the deportation of someone who did not necessarily willfully choose to come here illegally, but was brought here without going, and by illegally, I mean, without going through the immigration process. And one reason that people don't necessarily go through the immigration process is because it's such an onerous process. It is not easy. I used to work with a guy from Malawi. He had been in the U.S. for 9 years, had been filing papers, paying lawyers, and still was not a U.S. citizen, and had been here for 9 years and spent nearly $15,000 on filing fees and lawyers. That's why people sneak across the border. Fix that. There's more when we come back.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. I trust Coinbase. You should too. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Before I give just a little bit more on this immigration thing, before getting into some really interesting news from Ballot Access News about political parties and how in some states it's more difficult for an independent candidate than a minor party candidate to get on the ballot, and also an update on petition signatures for 2016 as compared to 2012. And that's not really something that most people ever really think about. So I'll get into that after going just a little bit more on the immigration thing here. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They now take Bitcoin for purchasing precious metals so you can turn some of your profits into a long-term, stable investment. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on investing. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. So the article here from Reuters gave some of the highlights, if you will, of what President Obama aims to do. Again, let me just run back over these numbers without commentary. He would let nearly 4.4 million people who are undocumented immigrants, who are parents of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents, to remain in the country temporarily without the threat of deportation. They would be able to apply legally for jobs and then pay taxes, but they would not be able to vote or qualify for health insurance under the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. This would also apply only to those who have been in the U.S. for at least 5 years and meet the above criteria of being parents of U.S. citizens or parents of legal permanent residents. An additional 270,000 people would be eligible for relief under the expansion of a 2012 move by Obama to stop deporting people brought illegally to the U.S. as children by their parents. The article here continues. It says, the president, speaking 2 weeks after he and his Democrats were trounced in midterm elections, appeared confident and determined at the White House podium. Outside, pro-migrant demonstrators watched his speech on their smartphones and chanted support for him, chanting "Si se puede," which is Spanish for "Yes, we can." They also sang the American national anthem. Obama urged Republicans not to take steps against his plan that could lead to a government shutdown, raising the specter of a crisis that some conservatives would like to push, but Republican leaders of Congress want to avoid. And there's a little bit more in the article, but not necessarily anything that I necessarily want to get into, because it just sort of rehashes what was already said and then continues to perpetuate the there's only two sides to the issue. There's the Republican side and there's the Democrat side. There are no other sides. Ah! That's what it gets into. And I don't believe in there's only the Republican side and the Democrat side. There's, obviously you support or you oppose, but there are myriad of reasons for either supporting or opposing. I would rather get into something that interests me greatly, and that is elections. As most of you know, that's kind of one of my things. I wrote a book about elections, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do. The book is Duopoly: How the Republicrats Control the Electoral Process. and there's a picture of what I call the Donkafat on the cover, where it's half donkey, half Republican, and one head is the other's butt, and one's butt is the other's head. So let me get into the article here from Ballot Access News, to where Richard Winger, who runs Ballot Access News, does an amazing job of putting together info on minor party ballot requirements, lawsuits that are going on in states where the requirements are probably unconstitutional, and I would say definitely onerous in most of the states. The article here is 2016 national presidential ballot access requirements are lower than in 2012. The ballot access requirements for the presidential election of 2016 can now be estimated. Many states determine the number of signatures needed to get on the ballot for an upcoming election based on the number of votes cast in the preceding election. Now that the November 2014 election is over, it is possible to know approximately what the 2016 requirements will be. Now, we won't know for certain because some states have statewide elections in 2015. Some states base their vote, or rather their petition signature requirement numbers based on number of voters that are registered in early 2016, or actually in the early part of any election year. But we can estimate, and Richard Winger does that here. He says in some states, the number of signatures for a newly qualified party and the number of signatures for an independent presidential candidate are identical. In some states, the number of signatures for a newly qualified party is larger than the number needed for an independent presidential candidate, and in others, the reverse is true, and the requirement is easier for a newly qualified party than an independent. So he continues here, says, if a presidential candidate running outside of the two major parties, meaning not a Republican, not a Democrat, chooses the easier of the two methods, that being goes through, figures out if it's easier to create a new party or easier to list as an independent in each of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, he or she will need approximately 579,000 valid signatures or registrants into their party. Because some states it's easier to just go find a certain number of people to register in your party to get the party on the ballot. Other states it's easier to get signatures. The article continues, the number will change if the 2015 state legislatures change any ballot access laws. Bills to lower the number of signatures are expected in Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, possibly a few other states, and I'm working with some state reps here in New Hampshire to hopefully try to lower the number of signatures needed here. But currently there has not been any legislative service request, is what they call it in New Hampshire, where a state rep files something saying, I want to put forth a bill. There's not been one of those filed yet in New Hampshire, or at least if there has, it's not up on the website for the legislature where they list the LSRs that have been filed. My guess is they'll probably have those updated again sometime, late tonight, early tomorrow, because last week the filing began in Wednesday of last week. Took them until late Friday to post anything. So there's more info from Ballot Access News when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system and to fully capitalize on that decision in their fundraising efforts. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They now take Bitcoin for purchasing precious metals so you can turn your profits into a long-term investment. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on investing. 800-874-9760. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for t-shirts, precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. That's shop.fppradio.com.
Join Darryl W. Perry on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, fppradio.com.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Before I get back into the story, or actually the stories from Ballot Access News, I want to make sure that I tell you about the FANS program. FANS are friends, allies, and Numery supporters, and you can join the FANS program for as little as $3 per month using PayPal, or any amount of Bitcoin per month using the recurring payments option available from Coinbase. So all of the members of the FANS program wind up getting every month in their mailbox a copy of the monthly newspaper that I've been publishing for a couple of years now, the FPP News. So as a member of the FANS program, you get that in your inbox, or actually in your mailbox at your house or your business, if that's where you want it set, every month. You also get the FANS email list. You get added to that, to where if I send something out to only fans, you would wind up getting that. And you get added to the regular email list that I have, to where I send out all of the articles that I write on a weekly basis. And you also get FANS page recognition if you want it. So some people have chosen not to. Other people, and I'm not going to put your full name. I will definitely, try to keep you somewhat anonymous. So if you have a common last name and a not-so-common first name, I will put the first initial and the last name, or vice versa. So, for example, Rob S. That could be anybody. But I do very much thank Rob S. and L. Warren, because Warren, again, somewhat common last name. So I try to keep you anonymous while also giving you credit for being a supporter of the show and supporter of basically everything that I wind up doing that is media related. So you can find out more or join the FANS program, fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. So back to the story here from Ballot Access News about the number of signatures needed for a presidential candidate in 2016 being lower than in 2012. Richard Winger writes, one ambiguity in the calculation is that it is not always obvious which method, new party or independent, is easier. It is particularly tough to decide this for California. Independent presidential candidates will need 178,039 signatures by mid-August of 2016, whereas a newly qualified party that wishes to participate only in the presidential election will need approximately 61,000 people registered as voters in their party by mid-July of the same year. And the reason, on paper it looked, it's 61,000 is definitely less than 178,000. But it might be easier to get somebody to just sign a petition saying, I want this candidate on the ballot, than it is to find people that are willing to say, I wish to be recognized by the state as a member of this political party. Although that's not really what you're saying when you register to vote as a party, but that's what a lot of people think that they are saying. So most of the people that are registered Republicans, they will say, I'm a member of the Republican Party. I registered to vote as one. Or I'm a member of the Democratic Party. I registered to vote as one. But they're not necessarily technically members of the party. They're just registered to vote for that party. The article continues. It says the calculation showing the 2016 requirements is 579,000 supporters, assumes the California registration method is easier because the number is so much lower. But if one assumes that the independent petition is truly the easier method, then the national figure becomes 696,000. The number in 2012 using the California independent petition process was 722,076. So as you can see, that's a decrease of about 26,000. And one reason, and I'm glad Richard Winger includes this, he says one reason the requirements for 2016 are easier than the 2012 requirement is that Virginia lowered its petition requirement from 10,000 to 5,000 in 2013, and California lowered the new party registration method from about 104,000 to about 61,000 earlier this year. Another reason that the requirements are lower is that voter turnout in 2014 was very low, especially compared to 2010. Now, there's another article from Ballot Access News that I definitely will not be able to cover all of, but it is very interesting because it mentions some of the states where it is substantially easier for a new party to get on the ballot than it is for a independent presidential candidate to get on the ballot. And one reason that this interests me so much is that in 2016, I will be running for president, not because I hope to win and take the ring of power, but because I want to give people an actual libertarian option. Now, yes, I know Gary Johnson is most likely going to run for president again as a libertarian, but Gary Johnson isn't really a libertarian. Gary Johnson is essentially a Republican reject that found the Libertarian Party to be beneficial to his cause. His cause was to promote Gary Johnson. And if you look at a lot of Gary Johnson's policies, they're libertarian-ish, but they're not really principled, philosophically libertarian positions. For instance, there was the statement he said a couple of days ago that businesses should not be allowed to discriminate against customers. And I completely disagree. And I'm not advocating for discrimination here. But what I am advocating for is free association, to where if I go into a business and they say, we don't want to do business with you because X, great, fine. Now I know to avoid doing business with you. I want the bigots to have signs that say we don't serve these people. And then I can avoid going there. Right now, I don't know who the bigots are for the most part, which means I can't avoid their business. I can't, intentionally not do business with them. And I don't think that people should be forced to associate with one another, and forcing association is not a libertarian principle. Gary Johnson also wants to tax and regulate cannabis because it would wind up, giving the government more money. I want to just remove all of the penalties and remove the word cannabis, crystal meth, and everything else from all of the statutes. So that's why I'm interested in the ballot requirements in 2016, and hopefully you can try to help me out. DarrylWPerry.com is the website for that. FPPradio.com is where you can find more Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. And this article will be in the show notes, even though I didn't necessarily technically get into it. Tune in Monday.